Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutit, watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. These are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates across the country. If it's happening out here and out there, we're going to bring it to you right here. Let's begin. A vaccine skeptic and known conspiracy theorist has been tapped to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. We'll discuss the president-elect's latest controversial pick and the reaction pouring in from Washington. The trial for the man accused of killing 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley begins this morning. We're live outside the courthouse as opening arguments begin. Plus, extreme turbulence forced a U.S.-bound flight to turn around what we know about the terrifying moments on board. This is CBS News 24/7. We begin with the first full week of the Trump transition in Washington. The president-elect is filling out more spots in his administration. He named well-known vaccine skeptic Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Health and Human Services Secretary and tapped South Dakota Governor Doug Burgum as Secretary of the Interior. But there is even more controversy surrounding his pick for Defense Secretary. Vanity Fair was first to report that it's not Seth. It's Pete. Pete Hegseth was investigated for an alleged sexual assault in October of 2017. Hegseth's lawyer said that the allegation was, quote, investigated by the Monterey Police Department, and they found no evidence for it. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns is in West Palm Beach and joins us now. Caitlin, break down these allegations and how the campaign's responding to them.
Hey, Vlad, good to see you. Yes, this pertains to Pete Hegseth, who has been nominated for Defense Secretary. These are allegations made in 2017, and we're hearing from the campaign, or I should say the transition team now, it's the transition team, writing back against all of this. Let me read you the statement from the transition team. President Trump is nominating high caliber and extremely qualified candidates to serve in the administration. Mr. Hegseth has vigorously denied any and all accusations, and no charges were filed. We look forward to his confirmation as U.S. Secretary of Defense so he can get started on day one. And this comes, of course, as there are lots of questions about some of these nominees who are being put forth by Donald Trump, putting forward nominees that are controversial but also close allies of him. And the kind of big spotlight, of course, this week has been on Hegseth, has been on Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, and, of course, as you just mentioned now, RFK for Secretary of Health and Human Services. This is all creating a big test for this Republican majority, this new Republican majority in the Senate, testing essentially their loyalty to Donald Trump and the mandate that he believes he has from being elected, and also managing their role in terms of advice and consent. That is the role of the U.S. Senate when it comes to these nominations.
All right, Caitlin, as you know, the president-elect also announced yesterday that Robert Kennedy Jr. is his pick to lead Health and Human Services. Of course, he's not a doctor. We know that he's anti-vaccine. He wants to ban fluoride in drinking water. And I want to read something, Caitlin. I don't know if you've seen this. The New York Post, which has been a staunch supporter of President-elect Trump, wrote this about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. When it came to topics, his views were a head-scratching spaghetti of what we can only call warped conspiracy theories, and not just on vaccines. Neocons are responsible for American policy ills. Pesticides, cell phones, and ultrasound could be driving an upswing in Tourette syndrome and peanut allergies. I mean, when you've lost the New York Post, Caitlin, what does that tell you?
Right, Vlad. And to be clear, the Secretary of HHS does not have to be a doctor. The current secretary is not a doctor. But you're right that RFK Jr. has a whole history, years and years and years of controversial statements on a whole host of things. That's why he had kind of become a pariah within the Democratic Party, a party, of course, which, you know, he was a member of. Of course, he's a member of a big political Democratic dynasty. He left that party, waged an independent bid for the presidency. And when he dropped out or suspended his campaign, he endorsed Donald Trump very quickly. And he was very influential in Donald Trump's campaign and was able to kind of bring new voters into the fold for Donald Trump under this mantra of make America healthy again. So he has a lot of controversial things that he said in the past. He has not only raised questions about vaccines, but said in an interview last summer that they are not safe and effective, which is obviously not true. So he has raised a lot of concerns among health officials, of course, but he has been a top ally of the former president, now president-elect, and just talking to voters on the campaign trail, especially women and mothers, a lot of them would comment about his pledge to take on big food and pharma companies and drug companies, talking about the ingredients in food, and that was kind of a big highlight of his on the campaign trail and for Donald Trump. Just to kind of explain, that's all to kind of explain the appeal. And notably, Vlad, in his victory speech last week here in West Palm Beach, Donald Trump singled out very few people who helped him here, his family, the Speaker of the House, and other, Elon Musk and other kind of prominent people. And he also shouted out RFK Jr., which really speaks to the way in which he has seen him as a top ally of this campaign and someone who did, in fact, help him on the campaign trail.
Yeah, when I was a foreign correspondent, Caitlin, working in countries in Africa, some of whom struggled to have access to the life-saving vaccines that we have access to here in the United States. For example, back in 2011, Nigeria was one of 3 countries who still had not defeated polio. They subsequently did, but it was because they struggled to vaccinate their people. And you don't want to take a step back into something that would look like a developing nation if children don't have access to these vaccines. So, of course, that's the concern. And the Senate, in their role as the advice and consent branch of the government, will have a significant say in whether or not RFK Jr. is ultimately picked to be Health and Human Services Director. Caitlin, great to have you, my friend. Thank you very much. All right, and top advisor to the president-elect, Elon Musk, reportedly met with Iran's ambassador to the United Nations earlier this week. According to the New York Times, the meeting took place on Monday. Iranian officials say they discussed ways to diffuse tensions between Washington and Tehran. This, of course, comes after Trump announced that Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will lead the newly formed Department of Government Efficiency in his new administration. The House Ethics Committee abruptly canceled a highly anticipated meeting set for today. Members were expected to vote on whether or not to release the report on an investigation into sex trafficking allegations against Trump's AG pick, Matt Gaetz. Pressure has been building for the panel to make its findings public. I want to bring in CBS News political reporter Zach Hudak to talk more about this. So, Zach, this was one of the most anticipated announcements in Washington this week. What are you hearing from lawmakers, and could we potentially see that report at some point?
Vlad, I think that we can almost certainly expect that at least some of the aspects of that report will leak. The reality is Matt Gaetz is one of the most hated men on Capitol Hill. He is loved by some, but has many enemies up there. And I'm sure that there will be aspects of that report that will become public, whether or not through official channels. I think probably more likely through unofficial channels. But the other thing we're hearing about that appointment is that there are some in Washington who are looking at him as sort of a sacrifice, someone who moderate Republicans can vote against and actually stop the appointment of in order to show that they will put their foot down somewhere. Now that is what some believe. Some think that Trump will make sure to get Gaetz through, get him through at least temporarily with a recess appointment, as it's so called, appointing him while Congress is not in session. And in doing so, what we would see is really something somewhat unprecedented. Matt Gaetz does not have the typical credentials of a U.S. Attorney General. He did go to law school, but he has not run Attorney General's offices or done things like that. And he's someone who has a number of allegations against him. So I think what we would see is a new level of a loyalist to the administration, to the president, running the justice system, which really would be a shift in our American political system.
All right, Zach, appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Vlad.
Some positive news now in the battle against a stubborn wildfire that started a week ago in Bone Dry, New Jersey. The Jennings Creek fire is now about 75% contained. So far, it's burned more than 4,700 acres. Our Tom Hansen tagged along with one crew for an inside look at the scene. Tom, what can you tell us about the efforts underway today?
Hey there, good morning to you. Well, we've already started to see fire trucks heading out to their positions this morning to tackle yet another day of fighting this wildfire. Now, fire crews have made considerable progress from where we started during the week, which was about 10% containment across the board between New Jersey and New York. Now, I can tell you that in New Jersey, they are reporting 75% containment at this point. Now, we are here standing in New York. You may be wondering why we're doing that as opposed to standing in New Jersey. Well, that's because all of the focus has shifted here where the wildfires are still less contained. Yesterday, we went along with New Jersey Forest Fire Service members who took us high up into the ridge on the New York side to battle the blaze and also show us exactly what they're facing. We traversed rocky, slippery terrain. It was very difficult to hike up the mountain. We went up about 300 to 400 feet on the ridge in order to access the fire line. And that's where we saw crews building what's called a fire break, which is essentially carving a line around the wildfire, creating a line of soil and clearing the foliage, which the wildfires use as fuel. In doing so, they are able to better control the flames and anticipate exactly where those flames are going. Now, they are nowhere near finished with that work, but it is proving to be effective so far. As we look ahead today, we are looking at red flag warnings that are reemerging. Those dry conditions continue to stretch for yet another day. However, we've spoken with New York and New Jersey fire officials who tell us that they are confident that they have gotten the leg up on this wildfire. They will be able to contain it fully in the days to come. That said, there are some houses that are sitting precariously close to those flames. Those structures yesterday that we saw very close to the flames, some homes on the street level, were able to be spared by controlled burns from the New Jersey Forest Fire Service. No doubt they are going to be out there doing the same thing today. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with the first look at the national forecast. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Vlad. Happy Friday. The problem is, as we head into the weekend, we've got more fire weather concerns, especially across the drought-ravaged Northeast. We will see a fire weather watch in effect for here in the Philadelphia area tomorrow. But for today, the red flag warnings, the fire weather warnings are mainly for southern New England. That's where the winds are really picking up. So I do suspect we will see not only new wildfires forming, but wildfire spread more rapid as we head into the weekend. Gusty winds, low humidity, dry conditions. A system came through yesterday, did not bring the much needed rain to much of this area. So the dry conditions continue. And as the winds pick up, that's the spot where fire danger will be highest as we head through today. We're going to see those fire concerns across portions of New York State, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania tomorrow as the winds pick up, and still none of that much needed rain. Where we do have a lot of moisture is across the Northwest. Heavy mountain snow expected into the weekend. Look at the Cascades as we get into the weekend and next week. We're talking snow amounts in the feet. 2 to 3 feet of snow that will likely close some of those mountain passes along the highways. Coming up, more on that northwest storm train and the fire threat across the Northeast. Vlad, back over to you.
All right, Kate, thank you very much. Prosecutors want life in prison for the man accused of killing 22-year-old nursing student Laken Riley. That trial is underway right now. We're going to bring you the very latest from the opening statements. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. There were no serious injuries after a terrifying incident on board a Scandinavian Airlines flight. A Stockholm to Miami flight had to make a U-turn back to Europe after it hit severe turbulence over Greenland yesterday. Photos show food and carry-on bags lining the aisles. The plane and its 254 passengers landed in Copenhagen so it could be checked out. It's pretty scary. I don't like turbulence. Vlad doesn't like turbulence. All right, turning now to a serious story, to Athens, Georgia. The first witness on the stand as we speak in the murder case that could become a flashpoint in the debate over immigration. Laken Riley's death in February became a rallying cry for some political candidates after it was revealed that the man accused in her death entered the country illegally. CBS News producer Jared Eggleston is in Athens, Georgia for the trial, and he joins me now to talk about it. Jared, we are still in the first 2 hours of the trial. What are you seeing?
Vlad, good morning. Already this morning, we have seen a lot of new evidence. So what we're seeing right now is that first witness, like you mentioned. This is one of Laken's roommates. Right before I came on with you here, I was listening to the trial. She was talking about how they tracked each other on a Find My Friends app. A lot of people use that app to keep track of their loved ones and family. She's telling the court, telling the judge in this case, about how they were tracking her the day of that murder. This is just one of the pieces of evidence this morning that a lot of us who have been watching this case have been talking about, including that 911 call, which came out in court this morning, where Laken was trying, prosecutors say she was trying to call 911 during the attack. Jose Ibarra, who is accused in this case, who is on trial right now, they say that he actually hindered that 911 call. And in it, you hear the 911 agent trying to talk to the person on the other end of the phone, but the line is completely dead. We're also seeing evidence of photos of Laken before she went on her run on this trail on the University of Georgia campus, and also some photo evidence, some ring video evidence as well of the accused Jose Ibarra the morning and after this killing, where he was out allegedly throwing evidence in a dumpster. So slowly but surely this morning, Vlad, just in the first few hours, we've been getting a better look at the prosecution's case against this man.
Jared, has anything come out about the immigration status of the suspect? Because, as we said, that became a flashpoint discussion during the election. And I just wonder, because you hear the term, he's in this country illegally, but I don't know if people understand how he came to be in the country, because oftentimes the words that are used about somebody who's arrived in this country are not essentially accurate. So I just want you to break that down for us.
Yeah, Vlad. So we do know a little bit about how he came into this country. We do know he crossed the southern border in 2022, and that he had had a few run-ins with law enforcement before this murder happened earlier this year. He was from Venezuela and did, like I said, cross the southern border. He was also had some other warrants out, but he wasn't alone here. He also lived in an apartment complex with his brother and several others also who had open immigration cases. But like you said, this was a flashpoint on the 2024 election trail. Every time the former president came to the state of Georgia around here, he would mention Laken Riley's name, and that caused a lot of people here in Georgia to really focus on the immigration issue this election, which, as you know, Vlad, was not only an issue here in Georgia, but it was something that we know through our polling that was an issue for citizens nationwide.
All right, Jared, thank you very much, my friend. We'll check in with you throughout the course of the trial. Appreciate it. Okay, hundreds of hospitality workers walked off the job and onto the picket line today in Vegas. The Culinary Workers Union and Virgin Hotels failed to reach a contract agreement overnight. CBS News correspondent Andreas Gutierrez is live in Las Vegas for us now. So, Andreas, explain who this impacts.
Well, good morning, Vlad. This impacts 700 workers who are the heartbeat of the operations here at the Virgin Hotels Las Vegas. We're talking about the housekeeping, the bellhops, the custodians, the food and beverage workers who keep the hotel operations going. They have been without a contract since last June, and they are looking for a new contract that is 5 years long and very similar to the one that the union was able to broker last year with MGM Grand, the Caesars hotels, as well as Wynn hotels. And in that deal, they were able to get a 32% pay raise over 5 years, taking them from about $27 an hour to over $37 an hour.
So let me ask you this, Andreas. How far apart are both sides right now?
Well, at this point, they're telling me that during the negotiations at the bargaining table haven't been really fruitful. They the hotel apparently was not offering any pay raises for the first 3 years, only years 4 and 5. And until yesterday, they had decided to spread the money around. I did have a chance to talk to one of the union leaders, and here's what he told me.
Well, when the company puts a last and final offer of 0 wage increases for 3 years, there's really not any faith in that at all. Now, these workers have to deal with the cost of groceries, the cost of rent like everyone else.
And so the hotel has said that the union has been negotiating in bad faith, and they are also saying what they're asking for is just economically not feasible for them.
And there's a big event next week in Vegas, Andreas. Could this be over by then?
Well, yeah, all the world's eyes will be on Las Vegas as they host the Formula One race. The culinary has encouraged visitors not to stay here at the hotel. In fact, they're telling folks that are currently checked in to check out of the hotel and to find other accommodations where there are, where they support unions.
All right, Andres Gutierrez for us this morning. Thank you, Andres. Appreciate it. A man from Texas is accused of plotting a 9/11 style attack against the U.S. Details next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you. Alex Jones is going to court to stop the sale of InfoWars. Yesterday, we learned that the satirical website The Onion purchased the company. InfoWars was put up for auction after a judge ordered Jones to pay a $1.5 billion settlement to the families of the Sandy Hook school shooting victims. They sued Jones for repeatedly claiming the tragedy was a hoax. Jones and his lawyers have raised questions about how the sale was conducted, and a judge has agreed to hold a hearing. Federal officials say they stopped a Houston man from carrying out a 9/11-style attack in the U.S. The FBI arrested 28-year-old Anas Saeed last week. He was charged with attempting to provide material support to ISIS. Prosecutors, according to them, say he spent time planning and discussing his efforts to commit attacks and offered his home as a safe sanctuary for ISIS members. Police say several arrests were made after an altercation at a soccer match between France and Israel. There was a brief fight in the stands after the game began, but it was quickly ended. Thousands of police had been deployed to Paris, and security was heightened around the stadium in the wake of those violent attacks against Israeli fans at a match in Amsterdam last week. President Biden is in Peru today at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, or APEC. He's got some high-profile meetings with world leaders on the agenda, but his conversation with his Chinese counterpart tomorrow seems to be generating the most interest. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is in Lima and joins us now. All right, Natalie, break down the agenda for the president today.
Vlad, good to be with you from Lima. Well, this is President Biden's first day at the APEC summit, which is a mix, as you know, of leaders of Asia-Pacific countries and economies, as well as business leaders. Later this morning, President Biden expected to have a trilateral meeting with the president of South Korea, the new prime minister of Japan. This will be the first in-person meeting between President Biden and Japan's new leader. So that's significant. North Korea expected to be on the agenda during that meeting. And National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan noting on the way over here that during periods of transition from president to president, that is historically a time when North Korea may be looking to do some provocative action. So they're on guard for that, talking with allies about how to handle, various threats, and then also talking about the recent developments of North Korean soldiers being in Russia and making sure allies are on the same page in terms of a coordinated diplomatic and policy position on that front. President Biden also expected to meet today with Peru's president, where counter-narcotics is expected to be one of the big items on the agenda there, Vlad.
So let's talk, Natalie, about that meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping tomorrow. The feeling, of course, is that he's in a lame duck period of his presidency. So can we expect anything material to come out of that discussion?
Yeah, the White House has really said that this meeting is kind of taking stock of
did you watch?
What's been discussed between the two leaders over the last 4 years. This will be their third in-person meeting since President Biden took office. But obviously, their relationship extends beyond that, back when President Biden was vice president. So it will be a chance to say, goodbye, but also to try to keep the lines of communication open. And that's one key issue that the Biden administration has really stressed, that it's important for stability between these two world powers and to try to prevent the relationship from escalating into any sort of misunderstanding or conflict. Particularly, you may remember last year when they met in conjunction with APEC in California that year, one of the big developments was restoring that military to military communication to, again, try and avoid misunderstanding and miscalculation. But I did, Vlad, speak to one expert on the region, a former government official during the Obama administration, who said that perhaps Chinese President Xi wants to signal kind of a willingness to strike a deal with the U.S. or, again, keep this communication going as there is uncertainty about the incoming Trump administration, the possibility of tariffs. Again, we'll have to wait and see what the leaders say following that meeting. But it is, again, a chance to try to encourage a seamless and smooth transition.
All right, Natalie Brand, great to have you there in Lima, traveling with the President of the United States. Thanks, Natalie. Israeli forces have carried out airstrikes over Beirut this morning as it continues its bombardment of Hezbollah targets over Lebanon. These strikes come amid renewed efforts to secure a ceasefire along Israel's northern border. Our Elizabeth Palmer has more from Tel Aviv.
There's been cautious optimism that a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon is close. That would stop the violence on one front of Israel's wider war. But even though negotiations are clearly underway, the fighting hasn't stopped. Israel issued an evacuation order to civilians in the Beirut suburb of Goberi this morning, and then fired missiles to flatten the building next to one of the city's busiest traffic intersections. For its part, Hezbollah is showing that it has plenty of ammunition left, even though the Israelis have blown up huge quantities of it since September. Hezbollah is still firing more than 100 rockets a day into Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli army is pushing deeper into southern Lebanon, and last week, 6 Israeli soldiers died in a firefight with Hezbollah fighters. Both sides are pushing hard to inflict as much damage as they possibly can before negotiations put a stop to the fighting. To add to the speculation that negotiations are reaching a critical point, Ali Larijani, who's an envoy of Iran's supreme leader, arrived in Beirut today. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you very much. I want to bring you back to our top story as the president-elect continues to fill out positions in his incoming administration. His latest round of picks for positions have been met with some mixed reaction, particularly his selection of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services Secretary. Kennedy has been an outspoken vaccine skeptic and has called for the removal of fluoride from drinking water, among other conspiracy theories. He has vowed to combat what he calls an epidemic of chronic diseases that he believes are brought on by large food and drug companies. For more on the transition, I want to bring in CBS News political director Fin Gomez. All right, Fin, there's not any surprise that there is this controversy surrounding any of these picks. But is there a strategy here? Some of these choices seem to be gaslighting choices, actually setting up who may ultimately fill those positions. In other words, you could put up some candidates that you know will not get the go-ahead from the United States Senate. Those senators can say, hey, look, I'm actually putting my morals or my commitment to the American people ahead of my loyalty to the president by, not confirming Matt Gaetz and then confirming who the president actually wants to be in that position.
Yeah, Vlad, absolutely. I think there's a couple things here, Vlad, I think we should stress. And one is that, President-elect Trump campaigned and has become and is intending to become the disruptor in chief, not just the chief of the executive branch, of course. With some of these picks, he feels he has a mandate to disrupt sort of the status quo Washington. Also, like you mentioned, I think some of these picks are intended to be sort of a political flashbang grenade, if you will, to draw attention away from some of his other picks where he believes he has a better chance of succeeding with. But overall, this is also a loyalty test, Vlad, for some of those in the Senate. As you know, with the Senate, it is supposed to be an independent body separate from the executive branch. And I think with the election of John Thune as the majority leader in the incoming Congress, I think the Senate Republicans showed that sense of independence from President-elect Trump. But again, some of his MAGA allies have said, hey, if you vote against these picks, we'll remember this. And when you're up again, either in 2 years or 6 years or whatever it may be, we will challenge you.
All right. So without control of either chamber of Congress, Finn, Democrats essentially have no power. But does this strengthen moderate Republicans, similar to the way we saw with Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema when the Dems controlled the Senate?
I think it has that potential, Vlad, absolutely. Not just centrist Republicans, but also centrist Democrats also. I think there's some, again, with some of these senators, I think you can look at some of these Republicans who've been critical of Donald Trump in previous iterations, previous cycles. Even John Thune himself was very critical of the president-elect following January 6, 2021. But also looking on the Democratic side, like if you look at Ruben Gallego, who just won that very hotly contested race in Arizona, a battleground state, as you know, but he is someone with a blue-collar, working-class background, a Latino male, and as you know, Vlad, that is a voting group that Democrats and Vice President Harris struggled with during the November 5th election, and that's something that right now, as Democrats are trying to have like a lessons learned type of mentality now in this stage. Post-election, I think that's where they're looking to make inroads. But overall, yes, I think the centrists in the Senate will especially could hold a lot of power in this upcoming Congress.
All right, Finn, we'll be watching. Thank you very much, my friend. Have a nice weekend.
You too, Vlad.
The other thing we're watching, Tropical Storm Sarah. This is the 18th named storm in the Atlantic this year, and the season is almost at an end, but it is this storm moving slowly through the Western Caribbean. It's packing life-threatening winds and potentially catastrophic flash flooding after making landfall in Honduras last night. Now, Sarah's expected to move into the Gulf of Mexico next week, but then forecasters say the path is less clear. So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with another look at the national forecast. Kate, what can you tell us?
Well, Vlad, we are watching Sarah very closely. The latest track actually has Sarah weakening and kind of falling apart over parts of Mexico and Central America, but we'll still have to watch at least the moisture, the remnant low associated with Sarah into next week, because if that storm moves into the Gulf of Mexico, the water is still warm enough that it could still strengthen. Here is the latest track from the National Hurricane Center, and you can see as Sarah kind of skims the northern coast of Honduras and moves over Belize and Guatemala, it'll move then through the Yucatan Peninsula, and as of now, the National Hurricane Center expects Sarah to weaken back to a remnant low and then just kind of fall apart. But it does look like at least some of that tropical moisture will get pulled toward the Gulf and possibly into the moisture-starved Northeast by the end of next week, just enhancing the chances for some rain, which would actually be not the worst thing. So we will continue to keep an eye on Sarah. Across the country for your Friday, again, we're not looking at any giant major weather problems as far as severe weather or heavy snow, but that's going to change over the weekend for the Northwest as more snow expected in the Cascades. We've got 70s across much of Oklahoma, Texas, and dry conditions up into the Midwest. Storm system that finally brought some rain to West Virginia, an area that's in an exceptional drought, is now moving off the coast. And we're seeing clearing skies across much of New England and here in Philadelphia today. But the problem, the wind is picking up. So here's your fire weather outlook all through southern New England. Through New York City, as we know, all of New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania, the fire weather is critical, elevated, I should say, for today, but will turn critical in some spots for tomorrow. And we have a couple of fire weather watches and warnings to tell you about. For today, it's southern New England. It's a red flag warning. That means fire danger is imminent. Fire spread will be rapid. There's a fire weather watch for much of southern New York, down through Long Island, New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania for tomorrow. And here's a look at why. The winds are really going to pick up. Today, the worst of the winds are over New England, where gusts could reach 20 miles an hour. For tomorrow, we'll see those gusts exceed 20, even 25 miles an hour across much of New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. That means not only new wildfires, but increased wildfire spread as drier air moves in for the weekend. Vlad, I'll send it back over to you.
All right, Kate, thank you very much. Appreciate it. 58-year-old boxing legend Mike Tyson is getting back in the ring tonight. We're going to preview his fight with social media star Jake Paul. That's coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. It's not going to be the fight of the century, but it could get that kind of an audience. Social media influencer Jake Paul takes on the legendary Mike Tyson in an exhibition fight in Texas tonight. And it got more interesting when Tyson slapped Paul during the pre-fight press conference. See a little bit of that now. Omar Villafranca joins me from Arlington, Texas. Set the stage for us, Omar. Is this going to be, I don't know if you're of the age where you remember Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on the old Nintendo system. You're going up against Glass Joe, and then Mike comes out at the end, if you make it to the end, and he's like, woof, woof, woof. I mean, that's what I expect is going to happen to Jake Paul. One punch hits the mat.
I never made it to the end. But also, let me say, this may seem like an exhibition, but this is a sanctioned fight, meaning whoever wins and loses will go on their professional record. That's the interesting part. 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight here at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. This is where the Dallas Cowboys play. I had a sports management professionals tell me that Jerry Jones, who built this place, is basically the new P.T. Barnum, and the latest entertainment here is Tyson versus Jake Paul. Mike Tyson is 58 years old. I'm going to repeat that. Mike Tyson is 58 years old. Jake Paul is 27 years old. And Mike Tyson has more amateur fights than Jake Paul has professional fights. So this is going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's an ethical concern. One is the point you just made, the age of the fighters. But the other is, as you say, Tyson has had way more fighting experience. He was trained as a boxer since he was basically a little kid. That stuff doesn't go away because the way, as you know, boxers train is ultimately it's their instincts that take over when they're in the ring. I mean, what are you hearing from people there on the ground?
Well, listen, I actually talked to Roy Jones Jr., he's arguably one of the best pound-for-pound fighters ever. And Roy Jones told me that what he's seen from Mike Tyson training is that he's taken this seriously. And he says that Jake Paul has never been hit by anyone as hard as he's going to get hit by Mike Tyson, even though Mike Tyson is 58 years old. Now, the state has sanctioned this, the state of Texas, but there are some rule changes that I want to go over real quick. Instead of 10-ounce gloves, 14-ounce gloves, which means they're bigger. Punches aren't going to move as fast and a little bit more padding. There's going to be 8 rounds instead of 10 to 12, and the rounds will be 2 minutes, not 3 minutes long. But still, Roy Jones Jr. told me that could mean there could be a lot of quick flurry action, which could make for an interesting fight. But Vlad, the big thing here, serious money. I'm talking money for when you and I would hear about Tyson fights. $40 million payout for Jake Paul, estimated $20 million for Mike Tyson, all on Netflix. And if this goes away from pay-per-view towards the streaming, there's a lot of boxers who are going to pay attention to that part of the business because $20 and $40 million is nothing to thumb your nose at.
Yeah, I guess objectively, Omar, if it does go the distance, maybe that favors Paul because it means that he can absorb the punishment that Tyson is going to deliver, and that may factor into Tyson's age, the stamina aspect of it all. But on the flip side, it also means that if Mike comes out there swinging hard and Jake Paul has never been hit the way Mike Tyson hits, it could be over real quick.
Yep. It could be one of those classic 90-second Tyson fights, or it may go the distance. Or Jake Paul's a puncher, and in a boxing match, anyone has a puncher's chance. If Jake Paul lands one, we could see Tyson go down.
All right, I'll be watching. Omar, thank you very much, my brother. Appreciate it. Okay, a daring rescue. Phoenix police race to save a driver whose car wound up at the bottom of a swimming pool. We'll have details ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, folks, we want to take you now to Capitol Hill. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is holding his weekly press conference. Let's watch.
But I'm not going to get out ahead of the top Democrat on the House Ethics Committee, Susan Wild, until she and I have had an opportunity to talk.
Mr. Jeffries, you serve with Matt Gaetz. What do you make of him being a nominee for top law enforcement officer in America?
Here's what I have to say about all of the nominations that we've seen to date and those that will continue, as well as the daily outrage that will be understandably engendered, not simply over the next few days, next few weeks, but over the next few months and next few years. Former administration and the former president promised on the campaign trail that America would have the best economy, the best border security, and the best administration possible. And the question that we have to all ask, when we're confronted with nominations like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., are these the best individuals available to the incoming Trump administration? Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., by way of example, the best that America has to offer? Will he and others give us the best opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the American people? Or are there other people who are better qualified to do the jobs that need to be done on behalf of the American people? The American people spoke loudly and clearly in this most recent election. They want us to focus on the issues that matter and to come together to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers, beginning with lowering costs for everyday Americans struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. Are some of these nominations a real path forward to solving problems for everyday Americans? That's the question that I've been grappling with, that the American people are grappling with, and the answer should be clear.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Mr. Leader, I'm sure you're aware of the brush fires in Brooklyn. There are fires in Connecticut, New Jersey, all up and down the East Coast. You often talk about fighting climate change with a fierce urgency of now. There's now going to be a Republican trifecta. Donald Trump has nominated Lee Zeldin, who I'm sure you're familiar with, to lead the EPA. Can you just talk about what the climate movement, what climate policy is going to look like this next Congress as it continues to be an issue that's top of mind along with the economy for a lot of Americans across the country?
Lee Zeldin is someone I respect, someone that I serve with, someone who I disagree with on a whole host of issues, but actually, given the communities that he represented on the eastern end of Long Island in Suffolk County, has some familiarity as far as these things go in the context of conservative Republicans with the importance of protecting our climate, protecting our environment, and protecting God's green earth. Hopeful that we will be able to find some common ground as it relates to combating the climate crisis with the fierce urgency of now. Clearly, we have a problem when you are seeing brush fires in places like Prospect Park, Brooklyn, and in other parts of the Northeast. We've seen extreme weather events later into hurricane season hit with greater intensity and devastate places like Florida and Georgia and North Carolina. The climate crisis is not a Democratic issue or Republican issue. It's an issue for the entire world to deal with in a meaningful fashion. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to do so and find the necessary common ground. As a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is one of the signature accomplishments of President Joe Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats in the Congress, who enacted the largest investment in combating the climate crisis in the history of the world, the jobs that are being created in terms of standing up a clean energy economy are disproportionately cited in red states and in small town America and in rural America and in ex-urban America. If the new administration truly is determined to stand up and improve the quality of life for hard-working American taxpayers and working class Americans, they should lean into supporting the clean energy economy and the wind and solar jobs that have been created in the heartland of America, not undermining it.
Leader Jeffries, who do you think is the leader of the Democratic Party right now?
Well, I announced earlier today my candidacy to continue to serve as House Democratic leader in the new Congress, and that will be before my colleagues on Tuesday, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to continue in that position, working alongside Catherine Clark and Pete Aguilar and every single member of the House Democratic Caucus. We have a responsibility to deliver on behalf of the people that we represent as House Democrats, to partner with the Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats. I congratulate incoming Majority Leader Senator Thune. Look forward to working with both Leader Thune and Leader Schumer. And as I've indicated, we will work with the incoming administration whenever and wherever possible. Thanks. Kevin?
To actually build off of that question, though, what role do you see yourself playing in rebuilding the party going forward? In what ways do you see that action taking place?
We're going to work as hard as we can to organize as House Democrats in advance of the 119th Congress. So we're ready to go on day one to deliver for everyday Americans. That is the most important thing that we can do. Build upon the track record of accomplishments as a result of what President Biden and Vice President Harris have done over the last 4 years, and decisively address the challenges that remain. Clearly, we all have a responsibility to lower costs for everyday Americans. We have a responsibility to lower housing prices, lower food prices, lower gas prices, and lower the things that are preventing everyday Americans from getting ahead. The American dream has been under assault for decades as a result of a variety of different factors: poorly negotiated trade agreements, the outsourcing of good-paying American jobs.
All right, you've been listening to the Minority Leader in the United States Congress, Hakeem Jeffries, doing his weekly press conference. You could hear earlier in his response was a response to a question by our own Scott McFarland. We're going to continue listening in to the Minority Leader, and if he has more, it'll come to you in our 11 o'clock hour, which is coming out of San Francisco. So pause for that. We'll see you next time.